We're built for struggle, us human beings. You're not after the bubbles of bliss that Dostoevsky described in Notes from Underground. We're built to contend with the world. We're built to contend with reality. You want a challenge. And the best way that you can take on a challenge, because a challenge fortifies you. So you don't want to be secure, you want to be strong. And you get strong by taking on optimal challenges. And so you lay out your destiny in the world and you take the slings and arrows of fate. And you make yourself stronger while you're doing so. And you might fail and fortune might do you in. But it's your best bet. And people have extracted unbelievable successes out of catastrophic failures. And I'm not saying that in a naive way. I know perfectly well what happens to people. You're doing fine in life and then you get cancer. And then 6 months later, you're dead. And all the heroism in the world isn't going to save you at that point. But that's not the point. That's not the point. Life is bounded by mortality. But that doesn't mean that you don't get out there and contend. And you develop by contending. And you minimize the net amount of suffering in the world. And that's something, man. That's something to do.
I'll tell you a little story. This is in my book. So I had this landlord in Montreal. He lived next door to me. He was an ex-Hells Angels biker. He'd spent a lot of time in prison. And his wife had borderline personality disorder, and she committed suicide when I lived there. My wife and I went over there, and we had a spaghetti dinner one night, and we sort of communicated. And I bought a poster from him, because he made these wooden posters that had neon on them, and that's how he made a living. He'd kind of trained himself to be a bit of an electronics guy, and so he made these things. And he was trying to quit drinking, and we talked about that. He was a lot older than me. He was like 20 years older than me. I was about 25 at this point. And we got along pretty well. But every now and then, he'd go out and drink. And he could really drink, like he was one of these guys who could drink like 60 beer. And you think, well, no one can drink that much, and you're wrong. I studied alcohol for like 10 years. Some of my subjects' fathers drank 40 ounces of vodka a day and had been doing it for 20 years. So you can drink a lot, and he could drink a lot. And what would happen, he was trying to not drink, but he'd go out and go on a binge, and then he'd be gone for like 3 days. And he'd drink up all his money, and then we'd hear him out in the backyard howling at the moon with this little ugly dog he had, And he'd howl, and the dog would howl, and he'd howl, and the dog would howl. And it was rather unsettling and made my wife nervous. But worse, now and then, he'd come to the door at like 3 in the morning, And he'd knock on the door, and he'd be standing there, and he'd ask me if I would like to buy his toaster or his microwave, because he needed some money to keep drinking. And, I didn't really want to buy his toaster or his microwave, but when the ex-Hells Angel, Joual-speaking, 60-beer drunk Quebecois biker shows up at your door at 3 in the morning and offers to sell you his microwave, the easiest thing is to say, I really need a microwave. So, I bought the microwave and the toaster and some other things. So one time he took me out on his 750 Honda, and he put me on the back of it. He wanted to show me his lair, I guess, his hangouts. And I got his wife's helmet on, but it didn't fit. It just sit on the top of my head. And he said, I got on the bike and he said, if the cops chase us, we're not stopping. and then away we went. And we went to these bars downtown on Saint Laurent. They were very rough places. And he got into like 4